My son said I was too embarrassing to meet his in-laws. Then they recognized me as their CEO. You won't believe what happened next. Before we get started, if you enjoy stories about family respect and sweet justice, be sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss an upload. I never thought I'd be sitting here telling this story, but life has a funny way of showing people their true priorities. For 30 years, I worked my way up from an entry-level position to become the CEO of one of the largest companies in our state. Despite my success, I always tried to remain humble and focused on what truly mattered, my family. My son David, however, had different ideas about what was important in life. I raised David as a single father after his mother passed away when he was only 7. Every decision I made was with his future in mind. I lived in a modest home in a middle-class neighborhood, drove reliable but unassuming cars, and put the majority of my earnings into savings and investments for David's education and future. I wanted him to understand the value of hard work and humility. When David went to college, I paid for everything: his tuition, housing, meal plans, and even gave him a generous monthly allowance. I never wanted him to struggle financially like I had in my youth. After graduation, I helped him secure a position at my company, though in a different department to avoid any accusations of nepotism. I even helped with the down payment on his first condo. Throughout the years, I'd noticed David becoming increasingly image-conscious. He began to distance himself from his old man as he climbed the corporate ladder. I didn't mind too much. I figured it was part of growing up and establishing his own identity. But I never imagined just how ashamed he had become of his own father. To understand why my son's actions hurt so deeply, I should explain a bit more about our relationship. After losing my wife, Maria, to cancer, I devoted everything to raising David right. I worked long hours, but always made it home for dinner. I attended every soccer game, school play, and parent-teacher conference. On weekends, we would go fishing or camping, creating memories I thought would last a lifetime. As David grew older, I noticed subtle changes in his behavior. The humble, kind-hearted boy I raised began to transform into someone obsessed with status and appearances. When he started at the state university, I paid $35,000 per year for his education. I remember sitting down with him before his freshman year and writing that first check. "This is an investment in your future," I told him. "The only return I expect is for you to work hard and become a good man." During college, David began dating Melissa, a girl from a wealthy family. She was nice enough when they first met, but I noticed how she would wrinkle her nose slightly at our modest home or make comments about my quaint lifestyle. David never defended me and instead seemed embarrassed by my lack of ostentation. After graduation, I helped David land a job in our marketing department with a starting salary of $75,000. Significantly higher than most entry-level positions. I made sure he was qualified for the role, but I did put in a good word with the department head. Within 3 years, he had been promoted twice, now earning well over $100,000 annually. During this time, I also gave him $50,000 for a down payment on a luxury condo in the city's most prestigious neighborhood. When David proposed to Melissa, I offered to help with wedding expenses. I contributed $45,000 toward their $120,000 wedding, a sum that still astonishes me. The ceremony was lavish, with no expense spared. I sat in the front row, bursting with pride despite feeling somewhat out of place among Melissa's family, who all seemed to work in finance or law and spoke constantly about their vacation homes and European travels. Throughout all this, I maintained my modest lifestyle. I still lived in the same 4-bedroom house in a nice, but unremarkable neighborhood. I drove a 5-year-old sedan, shopped at regular department stores, and brought lunch to work most days. My colleagues often joked about how the CEO was the least flashy person in the building. But that was just who I was. I found happiness in simplicity and saving for what truly mattered. What David didn't know, or perhaps didn't care to know, was that while I lived modestly, I had amassed considerable wealth through smart investments and years of saving. My company had grown substantially under my leadership, and my compensation reflected that success. I simply chose not to flaunt it. I wanted David to value people for who they were, not what they owned. Unfortunately, it seemed my lessons had fallen on deaf ears. The real trouble began about 6 months after David and Melissa's wedding. They had settled into married life in their luxury condo, and I would occasionally invite them over for Sunday dinner, continuing a tradition from David's childhood. These invitations were increasingly met with excuses or last-minute cancellations. One Sunday evening, after another canceled dinner, I decided to call David directly rather than texting. "David, is everything okay? You and Melissa haven't been over in almost 2 months." There was a pause on the line before he answered, "Everything's fine, Dad. We've just been busy with work and social obligations." "Social obligations that always seem to fall on our dinner nights?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. David sighed. "Look, Dad, I've been meaning to talk to you about this. Melissa's parents are coming to town next month for a big charity gala. They want to meet you, but what? But I'm worried about the impression you might make. You know how you are. You tell those old stories about starting in the mailroom, you wear those outdated suits, and you're always talking about saving money and living below your means. It's just not the image we're trying to project." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. And what image is that exactly? Successful, sophisticated, cultured. Melissa's father is a senior partner at his law firm. Her mother is on the board of 3 major charities. They vacation in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen. They're different from you. Different because I don't flaunt my success? I asked, my voice growing quieter. "Different because you refuse to enjoy your success," David snapped. "You're the CEO of a major company, but you live like you're still struggling. It's embarrassing, Dad. I've worked hard to build my reputation, and I can't have you undermining it." The conversation got worse from there. David suggested that if I wanted to meet Melissa's parents, I should buy a new suit, get a proper haircut, and under no circumstances mention my humble beginnings or frugal habits. He even suggested I rent a luxury car for the evening to look the part. "Maybe it would be better if we just told them you're out of town on business," he finally said. "It might be easier for everyone." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want to lie to your in-laws about my existence because you're ashamed of me?" "Not ashamed, Dad. Just concerned about compatibility. Besides, you'll probably meet them eventually, just maybe not at such an important event." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for hours, looking at old photos of David growing up. Where had I gone wrong? How had my son become someone who valued appearance over substance, who was embarrassed by the very values that had provided him with every advantage in life? The next day at work, I received an email from the charity organization hosting the gala. As CEO, I was often invited to these events, though I typically sent a donation and skipped the socializing. This particular invitation noted that Martin and Catherine Reynolds would be receiving an award for their philanthropic work. Reynolds, Melissa's maiden name. So my son was embarrassed to introduce me to my daughter-in-law's parents at an event where I was already invited as the CEO of a major corporate sponsor. The irony was almost too much to bear. That evening, Melissa called. Her tone was condescending from the start. "James, I understand you and David had a difficult conversation yesterday," she began, using my first name despite my repeated requests that she call me Dad or at least Mr. Wilson. "That's one way to put it," I replied. "Look, I know this might be hard to understand from your perspective, but my parents move in very specific circles. They have expectations about the kind of people in their daughter's life. David has worked very hard to fit into that world." "And I haven't?" I asked. "That's not what I meant," she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "It's just that you choose to live a certain way, and that's your right. But this gala is extremely important for my family's standing in the community. We can't afford any awkwardness." "Awkwardness," I repeated. "Like having a father-in-law who doesn't flaunt his wealth?" "Like having a father-in-law who doesn't understand how to behave in high society," she snapped. "Who might embarrass us with stories about growing up poor or working in a mailroom or bringing his lunch to work in a paper bag." I took a deep breath. "So what exactly are you asking me, Melissa?" "I'm asking you to understand why it might be better if you skip this particular event. There will be other opportunities to meet my parents in more controlled environments." "I see," I said quietly. "And David agrees with this assessment?" "Of course he does," she replied without hesitation. "He loves you, but he also understands what's at stake here. His position in the company, our social standing, our entire future could be affected. After we hung up, I sat alone in my living room, truly seeing the situation for what it was. My son and his wife were not just embarrassed by me, they were actively hiding me because they thought I wasn't good enough. Despite everything I had done, everything I had provided, everything I had sacrificed, I was a liability to their social climbing. The final straw came a week later when I overheard David talking to a colleague at work. I had stopped by his department to invite him to lunch, one last attempt at reconnecting. As I approached his office, I heard him speaking to someone. No, trust me, it's better this way. My dad's a good guy, but he's completely out of touch with reality. Can you imagine him mingling with Melissa's parents? The old man would probably talk about retirement accounts and frugal living while everyone else discusses their summer homes in Europe. His colleague laughed. But isn't your dad pretty high up in the company? Surely he can't be that unsophisticated. He got lucky with some investments early on, David replied dismissively, completely mischaracterizing my career of hard work and strategic decision-making. Besides, it doesn't matter what position you have if you don't know how to use it. The man could buy a mansion but chooses to live in a house that's barely better than where I grew up. It's like he's stuck in the past. So he's not coming to the Reynolds Gala? God no, David laughed. We told him he was too embarrassing to meet Melissa's family. He didn't even argue. I think deep down, he knows he doesn't belong in that world. I walked away before I could hear more, my heart breaking with every step. Not only was my son ashamed of me, but he was actively spreading lies about me to his colleagues. The disrespect was beyond anything I could have imagined. That night, I received a text message from David. Dad, we've decided it's best if you don't attend the gala next month. We'll tell the Reynolds you had an unavoidable business trip. We can arrange a casual dinner sometime after, where the setting will be more comfortable for everyone. I stared at the message for a long time, my hands shaking with a mixture of hurt and anger. This was my breaking point. I had given this young man everything, my love, my time, my financial support, and in return, he was treating me like an embarrassing secret to be hidden away. I called him immediately. David, we need to talk about this gala situation, I said when he answered. Dad, we've already made the decision. It's for the best, trust me. The best for whom? I asked. Not for me, certainly. And I doubt it's best for you to build a relationship with your in-laws based on lies. It's not a lie, it's just managing expectations, he replied. Once they get to know you in a more appropriate setting, they'll understand. Understand what, exactly? That their daughter married into a family with a CEO father who isn't flashy enough? Who doesn't brag about his accomplishments or spend money frivolously? See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, David said, his voice rising. You always have to make it about your moral superiority. Not everyone who enjoys the finer things in life is shallow, Dad. Some of us just want to live well and be respected in our communities. Respect is earned through character, not purchases, I said quietly. That's easy for you to say when you've never had to worry about fitting in with people like the Reynolds, he snapped. Their approval means everything to Melissa, which means it should mean everything to me too. And what about my feelings? Do they mean anything to you anymore? There was a long pause before David responded, of course they do. But you need to understand that this is my life now. I've worked hard to build a certain image, to be the kind of son-in-law the Reynolds can be proud of. I can't let your eccentricities jeopardize that. My eccentricities, I repeated, barely able to get the words out. You mean the values that paid for your education? That bought your condo? That got you your job? I've worked hard for what I have, David insisted. Yes, you helped, and I'm grateful. But at some point, you have to let me live my own life without making me feel guilty for wanting different things than you do. I've never made you feel guilty for wanting different things, I said. I've only ever wanted you to be honest, hardworking, and kind. It seems I've failed at instilling at least one of those values. Dad. No, David. I've heard enough. You've made your position very clear. You're embarrassed by me and don't want me to meet your in-laws because you're afraid I'll reveal the truth about your background, that you come from humble beginnings and were raised with values that apparently no longer matter to you. That's not fair. What's not fair is being treated like a shameful secret by my own son, I interrupted. What's not fair is hearing you lie about me to your colleagues. What's not fair is having every sacrifice I've made for you thrown back in my face because it doesn't fit with the fiction you've created about yourself. So, what are you saying? David asked, his voice cold. I'm saying that you've forced me to make a decision. Either you introduce me to your in-laws properly, as your father who has supported you throughout your entire life, or you deal with the consequences of your choice. Are you threatening me? David's voice was incredulous. I'm giving you a choice, I replied calmly. Acknowledge me as your father and be honest about who I am, or continue with this charade and see where it leads. The decision is yours. Fine, David said after a moment. If that's how you want to play this, then don't come to the gala. Don't contact Melissa's parents. In fact, maybe we should take a break from Sunday dinners altogether until you can accept the reality of my new life. If that's your decision, then I accept it, I said, my heart breaking even as I maintained my composure. But remember, David, every choice has consequences. I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time, contemplating what I needed to do next. The next morning, I went to work early and called a meeting with my executive assistant, Clara, who had been with me for over 15 years and knew almost everything about my personal and professional life. Clara, I need to make some changes, I told her. First, I'd like you to confirm my attendance at the Reynolds Charity Gala next month. Ensure I'm seated at the main table, as befits the CEO of one of the event's major sponsors. Clara looked surprised but nodded. Of course, sir. Any particular reason for the change? You usually avoid these functions. Let's just say I have a personal interest in this one, I replied. Also, I'd like to schedule a meeting with HR and legal this afternoon. There are some company policies I need to review. Over the next few weeks, I methodically implemented my plan. First, I met with the company's HR director to discuss our anti-nepotism policies. While we had allowed family members to work in different departments, we agreed that additional safeguards should be put in place to ensure all employees were held to the same standards. Next, I spoke with our legal team about the condo I had helped David purchase. The $50,000 I had provided for the down payment had been documented as a loan, not a gift, a distinction David had either forgotten or chosen to ignore. The terms stated that the loan would be forgiven upon my death unless certain conditions were breached, including actions that demonstrate fundamental disrespect or dishonesty toward the lender. I also reviewed David's performance evaluations from his department head. While he was competent, there were notes about his attitude, particularly his tendency to take credit for team efforts and his sometimes dismissive behavior toward colleagues he deemed less important. I hadn't paid much attention to these reports before, believing David would mature with time. Now I saw them as warning signs I had ignored. I instructed Clara to prepare a detailed report of all financial assistance I had provided to David over the years, $140,000 for his education, $50,000 for his condo, $45,000 for his wedding, plus numerous smaller gifts and payments totaling approximately $65,000. All told, I had given my son over $300,000 in direct financial support, not counting the job opportunity that came with significant advantages. The week before the gala, I called Martin Reynolds directly. We had met briefly at industry events, but had never spoken at length. Martin, this is James Wilson from Meridian Enterprises, I said when he answered. James, good to hear from you. Looking forward to seeing you at the gala next week. Catherine and I are honored by your company's support. The honor is mine, I replied. Your charitable work is exemplary. But I'm actually calling about a personal matter. Oh, his tone was curious. I believe my son David is married to your daughter Melissa. There was a pause on the line. David Wilson is your son? He never mentioned. In fact, I believe Melissa said his father was some kind of middle manager who couldn't attend the gala due to a business trip. Did she now? I said, keeping my voice steady despite the fresh wave of hurt. Well, that's partly why I'm calling. There seems to be some confusion that I'd like to clear up before the event. We spoke for nearly an hour. I didn't disparage David or Melissa directly, but I did share the truth about my relationship with my son and my disappointment in his recent behavior. Martin, to his credit, seemed genuinely disturbed by what he heard. James, I don't know what to say. Catherine and I raised Melissa to value honesty and respect, especially toward family. This deception is Troubling, to say the least. I agree, I said. Which is why I wanted to speak with you directly. I'll be attending the gala, and I wanted to avoid any awkwardness when we meet. The only awkwardness will be for my daughter and your son, Martin replied firmly. Catherine and I look forward to meeting you properly. Perhaps we can arrange to sit together. The night of the gala arrived. I had my driver, a perk of being CEO that I rarely used, take me to the event in the company car, a well-maintained but modest luxury sedan. I wore a new suit, not because David had suggested it, but because the occasion called for it. As I entered the ballroom, I nodded to familiar faces from the business community, accepting congratulations on Meridian's recent successes. I spotted David and Melissa almost immediately. They were standing with an older couple who I assumed were the Reynolds. David's back was to me, but I could see Melissa's face as she laughed at something her father said. I approached the group slowly, waiting for the right moment. Martin saw me first. A smile of recognition spread across his face. "James, there you are," he called, extending his hand. "We were just talking about you." David froze, then turned slowly to face me. The color drained from his face. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "I was invited," I replied calmly. "As CEO of Meridian Enterprises, one of tonight's major sponsors." Melissa's eyes widened in shock. "CEO? But David said you were a department manager who is too embarrassing to meet your parents." I finished for her. "Yes, I heard all about that." Catherine Reynolds looked between us in confusion. "I don't understand." "David, you told us your father couldn't attend because of a business trip." "He also said I was a middle manager who got lucky with investments," I added. "Rather than the CEO who built Meridian from a regional company to a national leader over 30 years. Martin placed a hand on my shoulder. "James and I had a very enlightening conversation last week. He shared some interesting details about your relationship, David." The look of betrayal on my son's face would have been satisfying if it weren't so painful to witness. This was still my child, despite everything. "Why would you do this?" David hissed. "You've completely humiliated us." "No, David. You humiliated yourself by being ashamed of your father and lying to your in-laws," I replied quietly. "I'm simply here as an invited guest, meeting the parents of my daughter-in-law, as I should have done months ago." The rest of the evening unfolded with exquisite awkwardness. Martin and Catherine were polite but noticeably cool toward David and Melissa. Several times I caught them exchanging glances that spoke volumes about their disappointment. Meanwhile, other guests, many of whom knew me professionally, came to pay their respects, further highlighting the absurdity of David's deception. The following Monday, I called David into my office. He entered with his shoulders slumped, all his usual confidence gone. "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "If this is about the gala," he began. "This is about everything," I interrupted. "Your dishonesty, your disrespect, and your position at this company." I slid a folder across the desk. Inside was the loan agreement for his condo down payment, along with a formal notice that I was calling in the loan due to breach of terms. "You have 30 days to repay the $50,000, plus interest as outlined in the agreement you signed. If you cannot pay in full, we can discuss a payment plan, but the debt will no longer be forgiven upon my death." David's face paled. "Dad, you can't be serious. We can't come up with that kind of money right now." "Perhaps you should have considered that before deciding I was too embarrassing to acknowledge as your father," I replied. "There's more." I handed him a second folder containing a notice from HR. "As part of our revised anti-nepotism policy, all employees with family connections to senior management must undergo a comprehensive performance review. Your department head will conduct this review next week. You will be evaluated solely on your merits, with no consideration given to our relationship." "You're trying to get me fired," David accused. "No," I said firmly. "I'm ensuring you're held to the same standards as everyone else. If your work is as exceptional as you believe it to be, you have nothing to worry about. And if I fail this review, then you'll be placed on a performance improvement plan like any other employee. If you don't meet the requirements of that plan, your continued employment will be reconsidered." David stared at me in disbelief. "All this because I didn't want you to meet Melissa's parents in the wrong setting? All this because you were ashamed of me," I corrected. "Because you lied about who I am and what I've done for you." Because you showed fundamental disrespect for the person who has supported you your entire life. What about Melissa? He asked. She's innocent in this. I raised an eyebrow. Is she? From what I heard, she was equally involved in the decision to hide me away. In fact, her exact words were that I didn't understand how to behave in high society and might embarrass you both. David had no response to that. One more thing, I said, pulling out a third folder. This is a complete accounting of all financial support I've provided to you over the years. Over $300,000, not including the career opportunity at Meridian. I don't expect repayment for most of it. The education expenses, the wedding contribution, those were gifts freely given. But I want you to understand exactly what you dismissed as not good enough. I stood up, signaling that our meeting was over. You have some difficult choices ahead, David. I suggest you think carefully about what truly matters in life. In the weeks that followed, word of what had happened spread throughout the company and our social circle. I didn't share the details myself, but Martin Reynolds was less discreet. He was genuinely appalled by his daughter and son-in-law's behavior and made no secret of his disappointment. David's performance review was conducted fairly but thoroughly. His department head, unaware of our personal conflict, noted several areas needing improvement, particularly his teamwork and attitude towards support staff. He was placed on a 90-day improvement plan with clear metrics for success. The loan repayment proved more problematic. David and Melissa had overextended themselves financially, spending lavishly to maintain appearances with her family and friends. They were forced to make difficult decisions about their lifestyle. I later heard from a mutual acquaintance that they had sold Melissa's luxury car and canceled their planned European vacation to meet the payment deadline. About 2 months after the gala, I received an unexpected visitor at my home. David stood on my doorstep, looking more like the son I remembered, humble, somewhat uncertain, but with clear eyes and straightforward posture. "Dad," he said simply, "can we talk?" I invited him in and offered him coffee. We sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared countless meals over the years. "I owe you an apology," David began. What Melissa and I did, was inexcusable. We were so caught up in impressing her parents and their social circle that we lost sight of what really matters. I listened without interrupting. "The thing is," he continued, "after the gala, when the Reynolds found out who you really were, they weren't impressed by your title or your company. They were impressed by what you've accomplished and the values you live by. Martin told me he wished he'd raised Melissa to have your kind of integrity." "Martin is a good man," I said. "I've gotten to know him better since the gala. We have more in common than you might think." David nodded. "He's been mentoring me in a way, helping me understand where I went wrong. Melissa too. Her mother has been particularly hard on her about how she treated you. And how do you feel about all this?" I asked. "Ashamed," David admitted. "Not of you, never of you. Ashamed of myself. I became someone I don't recognize, someone who valued appearance over substance. Someone who was willing to deny his own father to impress people who, as it turns out, would have respected you far more than they respected me." He took a deep breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. What I did was a betrayal of everything you taught me. But I want you to know that I'm working to be better. At work, in my marriage, as a son." I studied my son's face, seeing genuine remorse and perhaps the beginnings of wisdom. "The performance improvement plan?" I asked. "Going well. My department head says I've made significant progress. I've started giving proper credit to my team members and making an effort to know the support staff as people, not just functions. And the loan. We made the first payment last week. It's going to be tight for a while, but we'll manage. Melissa has actually taken a job, her first real one. Her parents insisted." I nodded, allowing a small smile. "They're teaching her the value of work." "That's good." We talked for hours that evening, truly talked for the first time in years. David shared his fears and insecurities, how he'd always felt pressure to live up to my success, but had chosen the wrong metrics to measure it by. Melissa joined us later, offering her own sincere apology and a beautiful handwritten letter that I still keep in my desk drawer. The road to rebuilding trust was long and sometimes difficult. There were setbacks and arguments, moments when old patterns threatened to reemerge. But there was also growth and genuine change. 6 months after our confrontation, David completed his performance improvement plan successfully. His department had noted significant improvement in his teamwork and leadership qualities. Melissa had settled into her job and discovered she had a talent for marketing. They had downsized to a smaller apartment and were living within their means for the first time in their marriage. Perhaps most importantly, Sunday dinners resumed, now with Martin and Catherine occasionally joining us. At one such dinner, Martin raised his glass in a toast. To James, he said, who had the courage to teach his son a difficult but necessary lesson about character and consequences. I only wish I'd met you years ago. We could have saved these two a lot of trouble. Everyone laughed, including David and Melissa. The embarrassment and pretense were gone, replaced by authentic relationships based on mutual respect and honesty. As for me, I continue to live in my modest home and drive my sensible car. But now when David introduces me to his friends or colleagues, he does so with pride. This is my dad, James Wilson. He built Meridian from nothing and taught me the most important lesson of my life, that true worth comes from character, not possessions. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance we can leave our children isn't money or status, but the wisdom to recognize what truly matters in life. It took a painful lesson for David to understand this, but in the end, that lesson may have been the greatest gift I could have given him. Remember, respect for family isn't optional, it's essential. And sometimes, the people we're most ashamed of turn out to be the ones we should have been proudest of all along.